everybody. My name is JCK.
And I'm Julia.
And we're here from the Missing Manual. Today we're going to talk to you about something that's come up a lot in conversation, for me at least recently, which is, what do you do when you don't have the budget?
And it's not even just you don't have budget. Maybe you have nothing to do with budget at all. No ownership, no involvement in it, but you've got a project or work that you need to get done that's going to require some funding. And I know I've faced it a couple times in my career. At the end of my career, I got to own the budget. And there were times where I had the budget, but then needed more budget because of projects that have come up. JCK, do you have an example of a time that you didn't have budget, but you needed to get some money? What'd you do?
Yeah, I think I might be a bit of an anomaly in this situation because I've been in the situation where I've had to I guess, make the business case for budget in a lot of situations. And in every one of those situations, the common thread was I didn't have budget to play with. But the outcome of what ended up happening was I made a strong business case and the budget followed with that business case.
I found sometimes that the budget that we had was inadequate, or the business would have, and this had to do sometimes if the TA leader wasn't sitting with the business closely enough, or HR wasn't close enough with the business, and then some business priority came up that we weren't prepared for, like having to go to market and hire a significantly higher number of people. And we didn't have the budget to do all the marketing that we needed to do, or we didn't have the headcount to handle the volume increase. And so there were many times that we would price out what needed to happen and then go to that business, and that budget would become part of the business expense for doing the cost of doing the work that they needed to get done. So it didn't come out of talent acquisition or HR's budget, and HR is usually an operational cost and not a driver of revenue. And so a lot of times it's not funded to the extent that it needs to be. And so we would work with the business leader pretty closely on identifying, and many times I did like a good, better, best approach to, here's what we can do to solve the problem, but here, if you want us to really knock it out of the park, those are the different costs. And then the business leader could then make a determination of what made the most sense.
Absolutely. I think in situations where I was running TA, I tended to, or running HR technology, right? I tended to be in situations where people were the revenue stream, or the revenue stream couldn't exist without the people to do it. So for example, in the hair industry, if you don't have a hairstylist, you don't have a haircut, right? If you don't have a haircut, you don't have revenue. If you don't have revenue, you don't have franchisee royalties that go back to the franchisor. And so my business case often followed they always, I guess, tied really closely to the people and the revenue standpoint. So how is talent like uniquely positioned to help you be revenue generating? In a lot of these situations, we weren't in a revenue generating or an ideal revenue generating situation, right? And so being able to, again, make that business case, and sometimes it was for millions of dollars, right? That I was going to ask for that I didn't have budget for, because I first understood what was important at the top. So if you are listening today and you're part of an SEC regulated company, or if your company is traded on the stock exchange here in the States, one of the things that you have available to you are securities disclosures. And those disclosures are a really, really good way for you to cut through the noise of what's important to your board or your investors. And so I sat with these. Now I could use AI for good to help me synthesize what are the key areas within this 10K or within this disclosure as it relates to human capital. And I was able to take my strategies I was building and make sure they were aligned to exactly what was important to the board and important to our investors. And being able to build that story that was within those guardrails really helped me then to be able to challenge as well when people didn't give me the budget, right? And so being able to challenge it like, hey, I thought our goal was this for the organization, was to make our franchisees in this situation profitable. And leadership would say, yes, of course it is. And it's like, well, how are we going to do that if they don't have talent, and talent is the product, right? To be able to make that happen. So what are your thoughts, Julia?
I had a similar situation where, well, I think back a couple jobs ago when I was leading global talent acquisition at CommScope, and we were in the throes of the Great Resignation, and people were leaving at a higher scale. And then you also had some business demands that we ended up needing to hire such a significant amount more that we built the business case based on orders and rec volume and all the things, where I had to go in front of the CEO and the CFO to ask for several million more in funding for talent acquisition. And it was a little daunting and scary. What made it better was that I had my CHRO at my side, and I worked with her through the business case and my slide deck. And we had 3 slides that we presented to the CEO and the CFO. And those 3 slides had tied, as you said, right, the ask and the need to the business imperative and to revenue. And within less than 5 minutes, I got the okay to move forward with the plans that we needed. There was a lot of work that went into the pre-meeting, right, before the meeting, to make that happen. But we really made sure that our messaging was tight, concise, and tied to the business impacts. And we could talk to what would happen if we don't do this as well. What are some of the things? But we tied it to revenue and demands, and we're able to get the approval.
Absolutely. So I think one of the common themes, or one of the skills that you're seeing that's coming up in both these situations, is both Julia and myself, we understood the problems that were at stake for the business. Not necessarily the talent acquisition problems, but what were the problems on the big stage for the organization or the business that were top of mind for leadership. And once we understood what those were, we were able to reverse engineer our ask to make sure that it fell within that. Right? You want to use your powers for good, Peter Parker. So like, don't go and ask for the moon if you don't actually need the moon. But it starts with being able to really understand what's important to the business, what are the key metrics that are important to the business, where are they trying to go, and how can you help them get there. And if you don't believe they can get there based on what they've got today or based on your current strategy, that is where, again, you're identifying some sort of gap there. That's usually the whole of where your business case kind of begins. And so some people might say like, oh, I don't have enough time to do this. I would challenge that you don't have enough time to not do this, because doing this pre-work, it doesn't take a lot more time. But this is the context and grounding that you need in order to build an effective business case. Because ultimately, it's not about me getting my idea to the finish line. I have to get something that's going to work for the collective group to the finish line, and something that's going to be successful for all parties involved. It can't just be talent acquisitions, this is what's important to TA, or this is what's important to HR or to marketing, right? It has to translate to the rest of the business.
And I think something that's really important to do is that you need to get stakeholder buy-in along the way. And so as I was developing my business case, I was involving other senior leaders to make sure that the case we were building aligned with them. Now, at the end of the day, we were not in an executive leadership meeting. It was the CHRO, the CFO, and the CEO and I going after the ask. But I've been in other situations where you're in an executive leadership meeting with 15 other people or 30 other people, depending on the organization, and you want to have people in the room that are your champions for whatever you're going forward with, whatever your ask is, especially when it comes to budget. So you want to make sure that you've got some buy-in ahead of going after some of the asks. That'll make it a lot easier. And those people, while you're doing the work, are going to challenge some of the assumptions or rationale that you've put in play to make sure that you're approaching it in the right way that's going to be the best for the business.
Now, let's say you're newer to your organization, you haven't built those relationships. You're trying to build a pitch for your leader, and you don't have those relationships that exist today. Where do you go? What do you do? So Julie and I are both a big fan of using AI for good, right? So one of the things that you could do is take that situation to AI, right? And being able to have AI help you identify what your different unique personas would be. So say you're a publicly traded company. Here is my company. Here is our most recent 10K. What are 5 different personas that you think I should develop my strategy, to take into consideration? The AI is probably going to come back with, oh, you need finance, you need operations, you need, HR or legal, right? Like marketing. There might be some different people that are involved at that. Then you can give them your strategy or what you're looking to pitch and say, I want each of these different personas to then go argue for and against that strategy, right? And then you can go back and take and analyze the responses that came from that. So then you're reincorporating some of those feedback points, the valid ones, into your strategy. So this is a way that you can use, again, AI to help you do some of those things. Ultimately, the best practice is to build the relationships, is being able to map who are your users, your stakeholders, right? And being able to seek to understand what's important to them. But you can also leverage AI in some situations to help you get a fair amount of that way or some of that way. Check your own bias, or where might there be questions here from somebody from a CFO's point of view or from a COO's point of view. Julia, thoughts?
My only caveat to that is that there are a lot of, you don't want to be going out to like any of the general AI tools and putting in any proprietary business information. Many organizations now have Microsoft Teams and their own AI infrastructure. So use that. When for most things, you can look at publicly available information like your annual report and ask AI a question to help you do something on your personal AI tools, but just make sure that you are abiding by any of your corporate social media policies and use of AI policies, because you don't want to accidentally put information into AI that is not meant for that kind of consumption, because others could get to it, and that's a fast way to get fired.
Yeah, we
definitely
don't want that. Let's not get people fired, right?
Yeah.
And it's always the best practice as well to use paid models, because those are going to have a digital moat around what you're doing as well. So yes, to what Julia said, if you do use your own personal, with permission, right, with your organization's permission, use your own personal model, make sure that that's not the free version. That does a couple things. Again, it puts that digital moat around what you're putting in there. But it also gives you a bigger brain to play with. And you want that when you're working with AI. You want to make sure that you're playing with that wider, more robust brain, because the responses are going to be dramatically different as well.
Yeah. Asking for budget or needing additional budget or managing projects when you don't have any budget is something that I think people will consistently be up against. And then timing of things also is really important. The example I gave before, where I got multi-million dollars from the CEO and we were in this hiring craze, and then a year later, we were in the exact opposite situation. I was having to go through and cut things out of the budget. And so those things will happen also, where you ask for something, you get the okay, and then partway through, some business imperative shifts or change, and you've got to pivot on top of it. And I'm sure we'll get into that. I think that's actually a really great,
it's a really great
next
one.
Episode. Right?
Yeah, I think another one too is like, so you gave me the budget and now maybe you hear or you see something in the data that makes it sound like this might not be the best use of that budget too. So being able to, again, be fiscally responsible, and when things aren't working, sometimes you have to pause the budget and then you've got to make the business case for why you did that. So, maybe I'm spending $100K a month on Indeed and my programmatic provider isn't deduping applications. And so in that situation, right, like I'm paying for sometimes the same application over and over and over again. Well, if I go back to the programmatic provider and they're not able to fix that, we have an issue. And so I could, continue to spend close to $100,000 a month on with that vendor. Or if they're not going to be able to fix it, sometimes I have to stop the budget altogether and stop that, because again, I'm not being fiscally responsible with the money that the company has entrusted to me. And so I've had to do that before. Julie, I don't know if you've had to pull back the reins and after you've gotten budget as well. There's a whole lot of all of this, but I think it's some of those, if we pause for a second and look at what are those universal skills that you need to be able to have in order to do some of this work. One of those is being able to A, understand what your problem is, right? B, being able to storytell with data, And then C, being able to make a business case, and a business case that is calibrated to multiple different viewpoints. So that it's important, they're with them, or what's in it for me is really being translated.
I think we're just about hitting time for our episode today. If you like what you've heard, please make sure that you like and subscribe, and please put any questions or thoughts around budget in the comments, and we can have a future topic or conversation around any item that you deal with work that you don't have the manual for.
Absolutely. Until next time, thank you for joining us for the Missing Manual.
Bye, everyone.